My name is Georgianna Swain. I was born and raised here in Hampton Falls 70 years ago.
Did you go to school here?
Yes. My first year was 1947, and lightning struck the East School in August of that year and destroyed it. So I actually started school in Seabrook at the old Dearborn Academy and went there for 3 years. And by that time, they had the new Lincoln Ackerman School built. So I spent 3 years at Lincoln Ackerman, and then when we got to 7th grade, everyone either went to Hampton or Exeter, parents' choice. So I went to Hampton, and from the center school, which was the junior high then, I went to Hampton Academy, and in my senior year, they had built the Winnicott High School. So I went 3 years at Hampton Academy, and then was in the first graduating class of 1959.
What do you remember about your days in elementary school? Or your schooling back then?
The Dearborn Academy was divided in half, and Hampton Falls had one side, and Seabrook kids of the same years went on the other side. So we had 1 through 6 on each half of the school. The first year I went, there was no running water. We had an outhouse in one of those 5-gallon jugs with got your glass of water from the jug. There was no central heat. We had wood stoves in each room, and a fire escape from the second floor. I went to school with Ann Sanborn's two older sisters. Kit was in my class, and Peggy must have probably been 2 years ahead. And I remember even as first graders, we were allowed to go down Lafayette Road to what used to be the Apple Cart, Big Apple, excuse me. But before then, it was a little tiny convenience store, and we were allowed to go down there and buy bubble gum and candy during lunch hour. First graders, walking down Route 1. It's unbelievable today.
How did you get to school?
By bus. The first 3 years I went by bus, and then for the rest of my school years, I walked up to Lincoln Ackerman, and we went by bus to Hampton and came home the same way.
Tell us a little bit about moving then into Lincoln Ackerman as a new school, and if you could start the sentence with Lincoln Ackerman, that would be great.
Well, it really wasn't, other than the fact that it was a brand new, spiffy, clean school with running water and flushing toilets and water fountains. It really wasn't that much difference. We had 3 classes to a room, just the same as we had the first 3 grades in Seabrook. And once again, I went to the school with the same kids, the same sisters and brothers of right until junior high, and then that's when the kids split up, and like Ann's Sanborn's 2 sisters went to Exeter, or maybe it was Sanborn Seminary. But anyway.
Let's try that one more time and just say, we need to just capture a reference. So if you could just say, going to Lincoln Ackerman, other than it being a spiffy new school, wasn't that different from Dearborn Academy. So say Lincoln Ackerman. You said it instead of Lincoln Ackerman. So we just want to get that Lincoln Ackerman reference in there.
Oh, okay.
Because they won't hear Judy's questions. They won't hear her ask you about Lincoln Ackerman.
Okay, when they had built the new Lincoln Ackerman School, and we started there, other than being everything new and shiny and running water and toilets and drinking fountains, it wasn't all that different. We still had the same 3 classes per classroom. And we had a gym and a cafeteria.
Did you bring your lunch to school, or did most of the kids eat in the cafeteria back then?
Most of the kids still brought their lunches to school, despite the fact that we had a cafeteria. I'm not sure that they actually even served lunches, thinking about it. It was just a kitchen, and it was there.
What did you do during the summers when school was out?
Mostly rode my ponies. If we weren't riding horseback, then we were probably at the depot. That was the swimming area. Way back then, in the 50s, late 40s, 50s, early 50s, people were a lot different. You didn't lock things. People left their boats anchored in the river there at the depot. There was actually a landing dock, and it had a ladder. You could, high tide, you could dive off in it, swim, and we'd go out and we'd get haul in people's boats and get in them and sit there and just drift with the tide, rock them back and forth, jump off. You can't, it's just, looking back over the years, you can't believe how totally different society is. We used to walk the railroad tracks. There were still trains. Trains still came through on a regular schedule. But we used to see how far you could walk on the track without falling off, which meant going all the way to Hampton sometimes and back. And and there was a siding for boxcars, and they unloaded stuff, and the station was gone, but the shed was still there. And we used to play on the train cars that were parked. Nobody cared. If you got hurt, oh well.
Did you feel you were fortunate to have grown up during that time?
Absolutely. I feel that our generation was probably the last good generation. I mean, there were only like 400 people here in town. A lot of open space. We still had dirt roads.
Did you have the sense that you lived in a small town? Did you miss being in a larger town?
No. I can't wait to get out of anything. Even Portsmouth is a nice place to visit. I don't want to stay there very long. I want to be outside in the wide open. I'm an outdoor person.
Talk a little bit about the open space and the agricultural character. You talked about that cow anecdote was great. If you want to talk about that, when you were 3 years old,
yeah. Well, those
picking blueberries.
I'm not sure if those cows. I think those particular cows belong to Carlton Edgley Sr. Because he owned that strip of land behind where I grew up to 95. That was like something that, well, when it was sold, I think there were 17 or 15 acres in there. Anyway, that was all pasture land, but right out here behind the museum, this was the Batchelder farm, and they had a whole big herd of cows. And they had 3 work horses. Probably where my love of horses started. I can remember my dad bringing me up to get milk. I couldn't drink pasteurized milk. I could only drink raw milk. So we came up to the farm and got milk from the cows. And Dad always had to take me in the barn and hold me up so I could pet the noses of the 3 work horses. And Paul Batchelder, shortly after the war, most everybody got mechanized. But I remember the last time Paul Batchelder tried to mow the field, and it was a field then, between Old Brookside and the school. The first time he tried to mow it with his tractor, he got stuck. And that was probably the last time the field was ever mowed. He could mow it with his horses, no problem, but he couldn't mow it with the tractor because it's low. And sometimes, well, probably not sometimes, probably weekly, we would walk, my dad and I would walk up over behind the town hall was Will Jambrin's chicken farm, and we'd walk up and get a dozen or 2 eggs, whichever it was, and back home again. And before they put in 95, back in maybe about 48, I'm not sure, the Route 88 traveled right next to the 2 cemeteries where you can, at the end of the overpass, where you can go in and park now in front of the 2 Brooksides. That was right where 88 was. And up here across from Wayne Berry's house, there was, well, maybe a little bit more easterly, there was a road that cut off and came out on Brown Road just below Bev Mutry's house. And right in the middle sat a little summer cottage and a great big old pine tree. That, of course, was right in the way of 95 when they built it, so that all went along with the little road. Great Hill was fairly open. I believe it was a Nason family that lived in the house, the big, I guess it's called the Federal style, right across from the forge. And they had both sheep and chickens, and the sheep kept that whole side of Great Hill open. And up on top was a wooden tower that they used during the war to watch the ocean. We used to ride our horses up there and climb up the tower and see what we could see, which was a lovely view of the ocean. Walter Coombs, right on the corner of 88 there by the forge, he had chickens, and the big field across the street from him was all full of chicken houses. And these were free-range chickens. They didn't keep them up in little houses or cages. They just roamed at will. I don't know how they ever found the eggs. Of course, Will Jambrin had many chicken houses. And there was another there was Featherland Farm, which had, once again, more chickens. And then there was, up on the intersection of Crank and Route 84, there was the Lance Farm with chickens. And all these areas were open and clean because varying animals kept them that way. And of course, Farmer had chickens before he planted apple trees, so that was wide open spaces. And then there were all the big farms, they either grazed it or they had dairy cows, and they either grazed it or mowed it for hay. What else can I tell you?
Well, talk about your first encounter with the cow when you were telling the story.
I remember about it. Dad took me blueberry picking with him behind the house in the cow pasture. And I remember that one. I knew the cows were out there. Oh, Carl Edgley had there was a spring out there, and Carl Edgley had put dug a hole and put a half a water barrel into it, a wooden water barrel, so that the cows could get a drink without making everything into mush. And that was there. Oh, I can remember you could still find that spot as far up as into the 60s. I couldn't find it now, I'm sure. I mean, the spring may have even have gone dry. Oh, and we used to play in Kenny Brook. Kenny Brook ran out and down to Marsh Lane. And there was some deeper, not hugely deep, and the brook was probably never more than 4 feet wide, its biggest spot, but there were some deeper places down there in the woods, and us kids used to go down in there when it was hot and swimming, well, splash around in Kenny Brook. But I remember one time we were down there, and we were probably only had our underwear on, or even less, and one of the boys from school rode by on his horse through the woods. And we were scrambling to hide and get our clothes on. I'm not sure if he ever saw us or not, but we were probably like maybe 8 or 9.
Did you tend to play together in a large circle of friends?
Friends were well scattered. The kids that I went to school with, like Ann and Carolyn and their brothers and sisters, were so far away that we rarely actually played with them. I had a best friend that moved in from Newburyport when she was 9, and we were best buddies all through school. Then there was an Ackerman, 2 Ackerman nieces. One was my age, the other one was 5 or 6 years older. But age wasn't so much of an issue then, because you just played with whoever was there. But we used to play up on the common with, the Ackerman house had an old barn, and it had some hoops from the wagon wheels. And we used to get there'd be what, 4 of us, 2 Ackerman girls and my friend Carolyn and I, 4 of us. We'd get the hoops and roll them around on the common, and the real challenge was rolling them down the hill on 88 from the common down to my house to see if you could keep up with it and keep it upright. We roller skated around that common. The common had the intersecting crosswalk for going from one side of Route 88 to Lincoln Avenue to go to church. That was why that was put there. And then there was a sidewalk across the front of the common next to Route 1. And that sidewalk extended down the hill towards Hampton, probably to what is now Fallon's Home and Hearth. And it went the other way and went down Route 1 all the way to what is now the bargain store. Back in those days, it was a little restaurant and cabins there. I don't know, the sidewalk disappeared over the years, but while I was growing up, it was there, and we roller skated up and down.
Tell us a little bit about your early work experiences.
Well, let's see. I started work at 10 for Edgley's Vegetables Farm. And I worked there for 3 summers. I think we got by the time the 3rd summer was up, we got the huge sum of 40 cents an hour. Good wages when you were that age and that era. Mostly we picked peas and beans and weeded the little vegetables. We spent, if it was really hot or if it was raining, we would spend our 3 or 4 hours. It was mornings. We worked mornings. Either snapping beans for, like, the restaurants at the beach, and LeMay's Tavern was a big buyer. And we snapped yellow and green beans and shelled peas for hours on end.
What did you do with all the money you made?
Well, the first thing we did was we ran over to Merrill's store and spent, let's see, 5 cents for a Coke and 10 cents for a Dixie cup, or 15 cents for the Sunday cup. That was the treat. 50 cents of that was put aside, and once a month, one of my friends would take us 4 girls that were horse enthusiasts over to Rye to Hayden Hooper's riding stable, and for $2 an hour, we could take a lesson. And that's where my money went. Let's see, after that, when I was 13, I worked at the beach for a friend's mother as a chambermaid. Hated it. And, actually, and the next year I tried waitressing at the beach. That was even worse. I really did not like waitressing and still don't. I've tried it several times since. And then when I was 15, I started working at Merrill's store. And I worked there for 30 years, and I always joked that the only way they got rid of me was by selling the place. But then I fooled them because they turned it into the post office, and I started working for the post office, and I was there for another 20 years. So I spent 50 years of my life working in the same building. Let's see, what else do I know about?
Tell us a little bit more.
Well, as a very young child, once again, probably 1st grade, I remember being given a note from my mother, or my father, or my uncle. I had a bachelor uncle that lived with us. He and my mother were, you'll probably edit this out, Irish twins. They were just absolutely inseparable. Anyway, he lived with us, and he was actually the source of my ponies, because my parents couldn't afford to buy them. But being single and living with my folks, he had a little more money. So he spoiled me. But anyway, I remember going to Merrill's store with a note and 25 cents to buy a pack of cigarettes. No problem. Give the kid a pack of cigarettes. And I got, a few cents. I got the change, whatever it was. And I could have penny candy. And at that time, Merrill's store, of course, was a general store, carried everything you could possibly want. And I remember they had a sort of soda fountain, probably only 3 or 4 seats, big mirror up behind it with a big fancy wooden frame, and you could get an ice cream or a soda. And the post office was a window with probably 12 mailboxes on either side of it. But hey, everybody got rural delivery. except the people that lived right around the hill. They had a meat counter. Of course, there was the gun shop. I remember much later in the years, just before they closed, actually, while the new plant was being built, somebody came in and bought a shotgun, did the paperwork, off he went, very happy, and the next thing I know, the police are in there questioning me because he had gone home and shot his wife and his mother-in-law and himself. And unfortunately, his wife and mother-in-law were, I'm not sure, from the Philippine area. And mother-in-law survived, but she didn't speak any English, and they couldn't get the story out of her. Eventually, I suppose they did. They got somebody that understood her particular dialect, but so that was one of my not so good points.
Did the Merrill store close because the family lost interest, or were they not competitive as
Well, the only one that was interested in the store was Russie Davies. Punky was past 65 and wanted to retire. Obviously, Russie didn't have money. I often wonder what it probably would still be there if Russie and I had the wherewithal to purchase it and run it, because we wanted to make changes and Punky wouldn't change. Quite set in his ways. We wanted to make it more of a real convenience store. But anyway, so he sold it, and then the Postal Service bought it and made it into the post office, and I went back to work in Merrill's store. My ghost is going to be there when I'm dead and gone.
So you didn't have a mail route per se?
Yes, I had a mail route. And Forrest initially had the whole town, and I was his sub. And then it got to the point where there were too many people for one carrier, so they made a auxiliary route, and I took that and worked full-time at that until it too became a full route. And then I had reached retirement age by that time, so I retired from the post office. But I didn't stop working. For the next, let's see, 8 years, I worked at various horse stables around the area, taking care of horses and getting paid for something I loved to do, and working out at the same time. I've always told people I got paid to work out while they were paying to work out. That was my take on it.
Tell us,
Yes.
can you talk about that and what you remember about it? What was special, and what some of your favorite memories are about the 250th? And again, Georgianna, if you could just say that I remember the 250th anniversary celebration.
Okay, I remember the 250th anniversary celebration quite well. I was in charge of running the horse show. That's when the horse show that the fire department took over was started. And I ran the horse show for the fire department for 20 years until it got to the point where nobody really wanted to work anymore. So anyway, my dad was on the committee for organizing the parade, and finding the 3 stones that are up there on the common with bronze markers on them. I believe Ralph Farley was one of the selectmen, and of course very much involved in the project. We had brass and pewter. Coins made. I don't remember the denomination, but we had those, and we had license plates. People really weren't into road racing that much. The parade was really great. We had Gloria Kent, another native of town, led the parade, and she was all dressed up in an Indian costume with her Appaloosa horse. And there were a lot of old car collectors, so there was a great selection of old cars in the parade. Graham Priddy and Bernard Mark were stilt walkers, and they walked the whole route from up here at the town hall to the parade to the common on stilts. I'm amazed. I can't get this far off the ground on stilts, and they had big, tall ones. And the fire department put on the I think that's where the Village Green Fair started, was with the 250th anniversary. And that went on for years and years and years. We really had a great time. It was a lot of work planning. People have no idea what goes into getting bands, even school bands, and there's a lot of work coordinating the parade.
You've been here for so many years. In what ways is Hampton Falls still special to you?
Probably just because I was born here and have stayed here. It's still rural. Nowhere near like it was. Those stoplights up at the intersection of 88 and Route 1 got put there. One of the reasons they got put there was because traffic had developed to the point of a car every 30 seconds. Now you've got a car about every 2 seconds. So what was a great idea at the time has mushroomed into something not so good, but I've learned to put up with it, as I'm sure the rest of the people in town have.
What else is on your list?
Oh, what else is on my list? Well, a little piece of history. My dad and I, when we had ponies, used to ride. This was after they put in 95 and the cows were no longer in the pasture behind the house. We used to ride down 95 and go into the woods. There was a trail that led into the woods that hitched onto the Shun Road, the old Shun Road, for the toll across the marsh. And you could ride across the Shun Road, which ran from the end of Marsh Lane, through the woods, through where Chris Merrill's house is now, and it went across 95 into the Swain Marston's cow pasture. We used to be able to ride, until they put 95 in, we used to be able to ride right across. And then we could go down 84 and up was now Janvern Drive, and there was another trail that was part of the Heel Farm. Then there was another trail, a logging trail that ran through and came out on Crank Road. There was a lot more woods and wide open spaces than there is now. Old Stage Road was dirt, Frying Pan Lane was dirt, Parsonage Road was dirt, Crank and Goodwin Roads were dirt, the Depot Road was dirt, Brimmer Lane was dirt. All gone, all paved.
What did they do for road maintenance during that time?
Well, it seemed like every year, I'm sure it wasn't, but it seemed that way. They would wait till the kids were in school. I say they, the state, would wait till the kids were in school, and then they would pave 88. Back in those days, they used hot tar and sand. So all the kids would come home that had to walk, would come home from school with tar stuck all over their shoes, which made mothers very unhappy. Maybe the shoes lasted longer, I don't know. But anyway, that was plowing. We had a lot more snow back then than I have pictures. My fence posts stuck up were about 4 feet. They came, the tops were to my shoulders. And I have pictures of the field, which is now the athletic field, with just maybe the top 6 inches of fence posts sticking out of the snow. Now that was, right out in the open, no plowing, piling it up. They weren't in such a hurry to plow the roads bare instantly as they are now. And you got used to driving around on snow-covered roads. You just simply slowed down. By the middle 60s, I had a horse that drove and a sleigh. And we'd hitch her up after a snowstorm and go out and drive around town in the sleigh. And, the old people loved it. And that was one of the things I did when I worked at Merrill's store, was people would call in their grocery orders and we would deliver. And if we got a stormy day, so there was good snow, I'd hitch my mare up and take the groceries and go deliver the groceries by sleigh. And honestly, the faces on the old people were just priceless. It was, memories out of the past. They just absolutely loved it. I do remember one day delivering groceries to Mabel Moulton over in Fogg's Corner. And we always took the groceries in and put them on a table or a counter or wherever they wanted them. And before I left, she was going through the box to make sure that everything was there. And one of the things in the box was blue cheese. And she said, "Blue cheese? I didn't order blue cheese." Well, she had ordered blue cheer washing powder. And when Russell Merrill, who had taken the order, had written it down, he would, hand scratching, it looked like blue cheese. So that's what, so needless to say, I'd take blue cheese back and bring her back some blue cheer so she could do the laundry. And even at that point, that house still did not have indoor plumbing in the middle 60s. She still had a hand pump at the sink and an outhouse.
Can you just stop for a second? I'm sorry.
I thought there was a party.
Oh, and
Sorry, just a second. Let's, did you get all that, Wendy? Did
Yep.
you get that?
Yep.
Okay. So what else is on your list, Georgie?
sliding and skating.
Let's talk about that. Perfect. Is he still in the
David, are you there?
Yeah. You're still working?
Yes.
We are, yeah.
What, for
How
what,
long do you think you'll be?
15 minutes, do you think?
Yeah, 15 minutes would be great.
Okay.
Thanks. We'll wait for the door to close.
You know, it sounds like you and your dad were very close.
We were. Dad and I, he taught me how to do all the handiwork that he would teach his son. I guess I was the son he didn't have since he had 3 that didn't live. So I'm not technically an only child. I haven't.
But your 3 siblings died?
Yes.
So you
My
were the
older,
only- you
my
were the
older
only
brother lived 3 months,
You were the only surviving child then?
and my twin brothers, identical twin brothers, I was 2 when they were born. They were, well, they were alive when they were born, but they were so, at that time, so tiny. They weighed 5 pounds.
They would have been saved today.
Today they would have been saved. My brother could have been saved today. Anyway, so therefore, since Dad didn't have any sons, I became his son, and I can set windows, I can mend screens, I can give me a hammer and nail, I can build you anything you want. It won't be perfect, but I can build it. I didn't learn plumbing and electrical. I'm terrified of electric. If I flip the switch and it doesn't work, I can change the bulb. That's about it. And beyond that, I don't touch electricity.
They're like my husband. He'll do anything, but he won't go near electricity. Okay, let's
About the skating
let's
and
get
the
back to
sledding?
the skating and the sledding. And then, is that the only thing left on your?
I think we probably, well, Halloween, but yeah.
Oh, we could talk about Halloween.
That would be
Let's talk
skating.
about both of those things, and then we'll let you go.
Okay. Well, that probably pretty much
Okay.
covers. Skating. Woody is, because winters started earlier and were colder when I was in grade school and, well, even into high school, you very often could go skating by Thanksgiving. Whittier's Pond was the place to be, and kids came from Hampton and Northampton. Whittier's was well used as a skating. The boys played hockey and the girls tried to figure skate, but anyway, everybody got along, and we'd be down there from the time school got out, you got home and got your skates and got to Whittier's Pond until supper time, and then we'd be back again after supper, and we'd have a bonfire out on the ice and skate till like 9 o'clock, and then 9 o'clock was curfew. Not just time to go home. It was curfew. If you were under 16, you had to be off the streets by 9 o'clock. Yes, indeedy, they blew a horn over in Hampton at 9 o'clock, and boy, you kids better be off the street. They should do it today for the same age. Anyway, Whittier's, the hill on Whittier's, that was all open, and we used to slide in toboggan, and you'd go out onto the ice, and the whole idea was to see who could go furthest, of course. And then we also went tobogganing at Newfound Hill, which is on 107. That was all cow pasture. That was all, but not grown up like it is now. That was all open cow pasture. And boy, you got a good ride when you came down from the top. And I remember one day, cars would park on the side of 107 to watch the kids sliding. And there was a stone wall there, and the snow had drifted up behind the stone wall. And I can remember one time there was a whole bunch of us on a toboggan, came down the hill over the stone wall and smack right into the side of a car. Nobody got hurt. We picked up the toboggan and climbed back up the hill and did it again. Halloween. Halloween was another fun time. The cannonballs weren't cemented together like they are today, probably because of us. We used to get the cannonballs and roll them out into Route 1 and roll them down the hill. Of course, not when a car was coming, but who knows where they ever ended up. But somehow, somebody always found them all and piled them back up again neatly after Halloween. And the ends of the cannons weren't filled with cement. They were packed with wood. And we'd gather up leaves and get the wood burning, and so there's flames coming out of the ends of the cannons. And the minister's son would get the key to the church, and we'd sneak into the church and pull the bell rope and ring the bell till somebody said, "The police are coming!" We had one police officer in those days, and we had all abandoned ship, and they never did find out who was pulling the bell. They probably had their ideas, since obviously somebody had to have a key to get into the church. We went around town and pulled up signposts, all the stop signs, the curb signs. We were bad. And of course everything got toilet papered. That was fun sport, and windows got waxed. Well, mostly they got soaked. I remember one year we decided to be smart and use wax, and we used it. We scribbled all over. Punky Merrill had the construction. We had 4 or 5 dump trucks, which he also used for plowing roads, and he was road agent at the time. And so, they had multiple uses. But this one time we decided to use wax. Well, somebody higher up the chain got wind of it and hid in the trucks and nabbed us. And we we had to come back the next day with razor blades and scrape all the wax off. And we never used wax again. Live and learn.
I had no idea there was a curfew. That is
Yeah.
such a wonderful story. Our kids who are going to be watching this video are just going to, their mouths are going to drop when they learn
I
about
think
that.
that probably originated from World War II. When everybody's car lights were half blacked out, and as soon as it got dark, all your shades came down. And because we lived right on the coast, I probably spent, until I was school age, probably more than half of my growing up in Franklin and Belmont, New Hampshire, because every time there was wind of a U-boat off on the coast, my father would put my mother and I on a train and ship us north so that we'd be safe. And I grew up having a second language because my relatives on my father's side were all French, and they all spoke French. And I learned French at a very young age. I could speak it and understand it. I can't do either now. I can read it. But yeah, I think that's probably where the curfew came from. I might be wrong, but yeah. 9 o'clock, that curfew blew, and if you weren't 16 and had a driver's license to prove it, you had to be off the streets. Crime rate was a lot lower. And you go down to Seabrook now late at night. I mean, I'm talking like 1 o'clock in the morning. There's kids out there on bicycles and walking around. Little kids, young, very 10, 12, 14, 15 years old. Do the parents know where they are? They knew, our parents knew where we were.
You were waxing those trucks.
Yeah.
You were ringing the bell in the church.